Either side appears really ready to concede. Let's bring in Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities and Raleigh Walters of the Heritage Foundation. Guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Dan, this is a major problem for American companies. You know, the U.S. Chamber came out with a report that said that, look, that we are losing billions of dollars, $48 billion, back in 2011. This is the chamber that represents U.S. companies that are afraid to publicly speak out against the Chinese. And none of that, according to the trade representative, has stopped. And we're supposed to negotiate with these guys next week. Dan, what do you say?
Yeah, it's a lightning rod issue. I mean, look, as someone myself has covered technology for, a few decades, this is really a silver bullet issue for the Valley and for software and chip companies going into China. That's why really outside of Apple, name another American technology company that's been successful in China. So this is really a huge hurdle to get over. And I would just really stress with 5G coming around the corner, that really makes us even more front and center as an issue, just given how key that technology is going to be in this battle between the U.S. and China.
And that's the whole idea, Riley. Let me bring you in here, of a split internet, the China internet and the rest of the world internet. But that can't be good for security or the future of technology, can it?
I mean, the whole idea around this sort of trade dispute is about technology. What we might see is sort of a decoupling of the IT sectors, but it's going to be very difficult. I mean, U.S. manufacturing in China, the relationship is so reliant on one another already to a certain extent that it will be costly to sort of try and force the two to separate.
You know, Dan, you brought up Apple, and I'm glad you did, because it's not just Apple and Tim Cook that are closely watching these negotiations. It's software developers, it's semiconductor companies, it's chip makers. All of them are going to have ill effects and continue to have ill effects from the fact that the Chinese are still stealing. It hasn't stopped.
Yeah, look, this has been a black cloud over, China in terms of for U.S. technology companies for decades. And I'd say right now, the biggest risk in the market, take out fundamentals, it's China. Because really, when you look from a technology perspective, this is something where the worries for investors is that a deal doesn't get done, but specifically on the IP side, because this is kind of definitely shining a spotlight on an issue that's kind of been there for many, many years. Just go to Redmond and ask Microsoft about piracy in terms of Windows. So I think this is something that could be a huge positive for U.S. tech companies if it gets done. But no doubt, I mean, this is a key area and really a linchpin of the deal getting done.
But Riley, China has to admit that they're stealing, and it goes beyond, they say, yeah, we'll open up our economy, but there are no signs that they'll change their behavior. So is there some sort of penalty that we can put on them or their companies, jail time, criminal charges, or something to make them say, you know what, we got to change the way we do business?
Certainly. I mean, that's right. I mean, we don't necessarily need China at the table to punish Chinese theft. One thing that has been advocated for is the sanctioning of individuals, Chinese individuals who have stolen or used known stolen intellectual property. Because, I mean, simply relying on hearsay about whether a company stole it or didn't steal it is not necessarily enough. To find the companies that have broken the laws and then punish them for doing that, both in the U.S. market and international markets, will be much more successful at bringing reforming China than sort of these bilateral trade talks.
No, Ryan, that's a really good point, because we know all about Made in China 2025, and they have said this is Xi Jinping that is leading this. They want to be #1 in electric vehicles. They want to be #1 in robotics. They want to be #1 in aerospace. But that means stealing U.S. IP property, intellectual property, Riley. And you've been bullish, I know, on these talks in the past, but are you now?
I'm positive that they're going to make a deal. I'm also realistic that the administration is going to kind of real quickly come to a wall on what they can achieve with China. I mean, one of the issues is cyber theft, and cyber attribution is one of the biggest hurdles for all cybersecurity. And not only assigning it to the Chinese government and then somehow punishing them for it, or setting up a system to punish them for that, is very difficult. So, I'm realistic that the Chinese, they're not necessarily going to want to play ball on this, but I think the U.S. should and can be doing more unilaterally and with our European and Asian allies to punish Chinese intellectual property theft.
So, Dan